Hi everyone, welcome back to Be Rich. We've got Sashwath back in the studio with us today through streaming. So he's got a very interesting article I thought we can talk about today. And without wasting much time, I thought let Shashwath first talk about what this article is about. Then we can see what are the implications this article is as an investor.
Yeah. So it talks about the recession, the entire debate which has been going on for the past year and a half since the Fed started tightening rates. So we've been talking consistently about whether there's going to be recession in the US, and if there's going to be a recession in the US, what's the cascading effects which we're going to feel in India, because we're deeply tied to the US economy, and most of the world economies are deeply tied to the US economy. So, that being said, this article brings up new information which we haven't thought about. So, this information is let's look. So, one key characteristic of a slowdown is you see an increase in the default rate, and you see an increase in the rate of charge offs, where banks end up saying, okay, this percentage of my loan book portfolio is going to be is unlikely to pay it back, so I'm going to account for this. That's how it works. So this accounting which they do, they give you a report every quarter or every whatever. There's a time period in which they give it to you, and what this data says is that you would expect that with tightening, the burden of debt increasing and so on and so forth, you'd assume that this charge off would be quite high. That is, it should increase at an alarming rate. But surprisingly enough, going from 0% to 5% or wherever the U.S. interest rate is currently is hasn't had much of an effect in terms of the increase in chargebacks, at least at a surface level, because the chargeback. So yes, it has increased. There's been a marginal uptick, and on the margins there has been an uptick. But this uptick is something which is like a statistical noise type thing, because the number keeps moving up and down even if nothing else changes. That's just part of how the economy works. So that being said, there's not enough evidence to show that there's a recession coming and that debtors are feeling under pressure or anything like that. And this is another reason why. And what the banking officials have said is that this is more of a normalization, because post pandemic, what has ended up happening was that you had excess savings because you had stimulus checks. And what this led to was that this money just ended up going into the bank account of people. And this was money which they weren't expecting. So a lot of people ended up spending it on very frivolous goods, and a lot of them ended up buying things which they didn't need much. So you saw an uptick for like smartphones and smartphone sales and other things like that. So that being said, the economy, there's a post-pandemic boom, and the economy had great growth. So the after effects of that, you'd assume that there'd be a sort of normalization where, because the stimulus checks were given then, there was a downtick in the amount of charge-offs, because now everyone had an extra $1,000 in their bank account, so they could pay off their debt. So people who would have normally not been able to pay off their debt had been allowed to pay off their debt. So you saw that the rate of the debt which is not able to being paid off, which is not being able to pay it off, has gone down during post pandemic because of the stimulus and low interest rates. But now what banking officials have said is that, okay, boss, it's stimulus effects are gone now. We are moving into a new phase, and the rates are going to stabilize back to where they were before. So if you look at the curve, yes, it's going up, but it's going up from it's still below your pre-pandemic levels. So it's almost like a base effect, like a low base effect, but it's not much of a an uptick overall, in objectively speaking. So that's where it stands. And then the second half of this article talks about savings. So it says that $1,000, yes, the indebted people like paid off their debt and savings was extinguished, but not really, because paying off your debt is one way of extinguishing the savings. But also the people who spent, that travels up the ladder and it ends up going into the pockets of the ultra wealthy. And these are the kind of people who don't spend much. So the money sort of lays dormant. But the argument this article is making is saying that you can't just say that, oh, it's been a year, so the effect of the stimulus is done. So they're saying that savings makes rounds. It goes again from the bottom layer to the top to the bottom, and then it keeps going in a cycle. So like a washing machine keeps going in a cycle like that, your economy also goes like that. So what ends up happening is your economy is doing quite strong. That's why inflation wasn't transitory, which is why Powell had to raise interest rates all the way up to 5%, because he had to curb this stubborn inflation because your economy is doing quite well. So that's where it stands. So what do you have to say about that?
The analogy which comes to me is I always go back to my weight loss and dieting analogies because that's something predominantly which is there on my mind always. And this is comes to when you get onto a new diet. So every time, let's say, even you start intermittent fasting, you start intermittent fasting, let's say from today, you won't
Yeah,
experience weight loss in the first week. You won't experience weight loss in the second week. You won't even be experiencing any weight loss in the third week. But suddenly in the fourth week and the middle of the fifth week, you'll have a sudden drop in your weight. It's like
yeah,
this. You've been eating less and you've been eating less and you're wondering why nothing is happening. You're like very irritated with yourself and you give up in the whole notion of this diet and you're like, here I am, been starving myself and nothing is happening. And suddenly after it breaks that plateau and it drops. The
yeah,
stimulus money which is there circulating in the world economy is like that. We've been pumping free cash for so long, for last more than 10 years. We've been pumping free cash, and it's just so much of money, and you don't even know where the money is. You know, so-called trickle-down economics they talked about that will feed money to the wealthy companies, the banks, and all that money will trickle down. It didn't happen. Most of the money didn't trickle down. Most of the
yeah,
money got stuck here and there everywhere as it was coming down the pyramid. It got stuck in various places. So now that they've tightened it, you cannot expect it to rebound immediately. Okay, they tightened for maybe 6 months, they tightened for 1 year. You're not going to
yeah,
see it suddenly going back, inflation suddenly switching gears and going the other way. Simply like the reason that article said. You've been giving
yeah,
stimulus, let's say, to the poorest of the poor in the US. Instead of, let's say, we're giving it to the wealthy companies, you give it to someone who's very poor. That guy in turn takes that money and he spends it to with another person, maybe not wealthy, who's slightly above him. That guy takes
yeah,
the money. He in turn is a businessman. He can keep the money in his savings account, or he can take it and reuse it, to pay his vendors, the manufacturer of the goods he's selling. He might be, let's say, a retailer. He'll pay the distributor. The distributor in
yes,
turn pays the manufacturer. The manufacturer, finally, that stimulus money goes up the ladder. It's in the article they call it trickle up. The savings
yeah,
trickle
trickle
up,
up.
where the savings from the poor start trickling up the ladder in the economy, and finally it goes to sit in Tim Cook's pocket, Jeff
Yeah,
Bezos' pocket, because that's where it sits. And Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook, when all that extra cash comes, they're not going to spend it. They don't need to spend it.
they're not spending it.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so all that cash, that stimulus money is there clogging up different parts of the economy, and for all of it dislodge and get extinguished, is going to take a very long time. And
yeah,
is that being said, so what does this mean? This means this inflationary expectations we had are going to be there for some time. You know, like what Anand was saying in the video which he was talking to you. You just switch some things like this immediately doesn't mean like I'm saying I'm going on to a new diet, intermittent fasting. Immediately,
yeah,
I start starving my body doesn't mean immediately you're going to see results. The world economy is as complicated as the human body is. Yes, there are different inputs to it, there are different things which happen in it, but the way it actually works, no one really knows how it works. As much as a panel of doctors will sit around an ICU patient and they'll discuss treatment options and they'll weigh the
yeah,
pros and cons, then they'll
yeah,
test and different protocols of medical treatment they'll try on the patient and see how
yeah.
he's responding, and they'll say let's wait for a week and see. The same thing the
And
economists are doing. The Fed is doing. They'll tinker here and there. Then they'll wait and see. Let's be like, okay, let's wait for a month and see what happens. Let's see what happens to the market. And when they don't see the results they expect, they don't see the stock market correcting. They don't see the gold price correcting the way they want. They don't see, actual pain happening. Then they'll be like, okay, we need to maybe do more of this, or maybe we need
yeah,
to do something else different, like what that other article you bought, that British economist who said, instead of just
yes,
tightening, bringing a sledgehammer, we need to like look at taxing the rich more. You know,
Pete
maybe that's
Barker,
what.
yeah,
Yeah, because if all this trickle up saving has gone up to people like Jeff Bezos and the Tim Cooks, maybe those guys need to be really slashed. They need to be squeezed, and they can only be squeezed through taxation. There's
yeah,
no other way to squeeze, and this has to be a concentrated effort throughout the world. Globally, all the countries around the world, everyone has to agree. Okay, You can't allow this kind of free wealth and the uber rich to run rampant. We all need to agree we need to clamp down. Because
And
if
the
one
funny
bad
thing
player
is,
you have,
yeah,
if you have one bad player, all that money will go and sit there. And which country wouldn't
exactly.
want that? Which country? Right
Yes.
now, Sri Lanka would be happy to allow Jeff Bezos to bring all this money and say zero tax for you.
Yeah.
Bring Elon Musk, bring $50 billion, zero tax for you. We'll give you free land. You build as many Tesla parks as you want. As long as you give us jobs right now, we need to feed our people. Forget
Yeah.
the environment. What environment laws? No environmental laws in Pakistan. You bring whatever you want.
A-
So that's what
And
happens.
in the comments of that video, someone was saying that how much will you tax them? You're already taxing them. They'll have to live on bread and water, my friend. Even 1% of what they own, even if you tax them 99%, even 1% of what they own is enough to feed a small city of people
Yeah.
for like 10 years. So please think before commenting things like that, because there is a certain logic before saying that you want to tax the rich, because the idea is that there's a lot of money which is getting clogged up there,
No,
and
that's
you
why
have
I
to
would like
realize this.
all these guys who make these comments. I would like them to do a thought experiment. Let's
Yeah,
say imagine you're someone like Elon Musk, and you have $100 billion. Okay, let's say you start spending every day. You spend 1 lakh. You spend 2 lakhs. Do the
yeah,
math. Just do the take a calculator. It's just a thought experiment. Just punch the
yeah,
numbers, multiply it out, see how much money you would spend in 40 years, and you'll be astonished with the amount of money you will have left if you out of that $100 billion, you don't even invest it. You just keep it in an
yeah,
account with zero interest. You're just sitting
yeah.
there. You multiply it out. You'll be shocked the amount of money, even after inflation, that will be still left.
And their next argument would be it's all paper wealth. But even without paper wealth, the amount of revenue they earn on their company, and then the profits, and then what salary they take home, even after that, you can still make an argument for how much they should be taxed. So I don't really subscribe. Yes, I don't subscribe to the idea of taxing paper wealth, but I definitely think that we can do more in terms of taxing where these people do hide a lot of their money, which is in estates.
No, people will not have a problem with this. What we and you are saying, Shashwat, if it has a physical, manifestation of this. Let's say,
Yeah,
like someone who's completely obese and overweight. Let's say I'm weighing 400 pounds, and you sit
yeah,
sit and watch videos of me just stuffing food on my mouth endlessly. You'll be like, "Hey, something is wrong here. Someone needs to help this guy." Or let's say I'm
yeah,
absolutely anorexic and I'm completely emaciated. I'm starving myself, and I'm thinking I'm
yeah,
very fat. People will be like, "What's wrong with you guys? Something's wrong with him. Help him." But in the case
yeah,
of someone like a wealthy person, like a billionaire, you can't see that wealth.
yeah,
You can't see it. Especially people like Warren Buffett. He's not flashy. He's not rolling around. Wearing 10,000 Rolex watches, flying in
yeah,
gold planes. Buying up insane properties everywhere. You don't see it. So you look at him, you're like, "Hey, why are you like picking on him?"
yeah.
We're not picking on him. It's just that when you look at in a macroeconomic situation and you look at the economy and the society as a whole, it's only healthy if every system moves freely, the money moves freely. If it gets
Yes.
held up anywhere and just sits somewhere, it doesn't help anybody.
It's a waste of assets.
Yeah, it's a waste of assets. Absolutely right. It's a waste of potential. If it's
Yeah,
like someone who's very talented at playing musical instrument and they don't, play it and they don't do it, as a parent, you'll be like, "Oh, you're so talented. Why don't you do something about it?" It's
yeah,
the same as that. If you have $40 billion, $50 billion sitting in your account and you don't need it, do something with it. You know,
yes,
yes, you can argue saying the governments are bad, they do not know how to spend the money, governments are terrible, they waste money, it's fully corrupt. But
yeah,
we need to, as a society, we need to find a solution because what we're doing is not working.
yeah,
It's just proof of the matter. It's like climate change, we have been denying climate change for so long. Now we have floods everywhere, we have extreme heat everywhere, and there's still people who think it's just like tropic thunder, don't worry about it. They're going into, you see people standing next to the thermometer in Death Valley taking a photo like, "Hey, today is 59." The guy standing there saying, "Dude, tomorrow's going to be 60, tomorrow it's going to be
yeah,
like 62." This is not a record that's going to be staying for very long
yeah,
because the nature of it has become so bad that it's going to be getting worse day by day. And if we talk about the problems of our poor in our society, poor globally, and the lopsided way wealth is being distributed, it's going to be a huge problem. It's not something like, oh, it's always been there. The poor have always been there.
Yeah.
There are people who are wealthy in our society. So what? It's not that.
And I've read Frederick Hayek, and I subscribe to the free market view and the invisible hand, efficiency, so on and so forth. That being said, when there is an excess, as Adam Smith said, you have to be able to come and cure it. You cannot have excesses in economy, because when you do have excesses, millions of people suffer. So if you do have any sense, any semblance of empathy for your own people, I'd say that you should definitely think twice about taxing the rich.
And
Think
if you're a
twice about
wealthy
what
person,
you do.
let's say I'm a wealthy person, I have billions of dollars, it would be in my own self-interest and self-preservation to distribute my wealth.
Yeah,
Because simple
exactly.
reason is, end of the day, it's like the French Revolution. I'll be a target person because
You'll
I'll
be the
target will
first
be
one.
painted because they'll be like, you're hoarding everything. So
Yeah,
I don't want to be hoarding, man. And trust me, if
yeah.
we as society don't decide to find a solution together and work together,
They're going to go to
inevitably nature
extremes.
itself finds a solution, and that
Yeah,
what leads to all kinds of conflict, a new world order, and all kinds of things happen just because you take a few sections of society and you torture them and you marginalize them, and that
yeah.
section starts growing, becoming bigger and bigger. Finally they become the majority. Boy and boy, you're going to have a huge problem in your hand.
And in
Louis,
fact, they are the majority.
yeah, and King Louis, when he in France, he couldn't fix it. He saw
Yeah,
the problem. He saw the starvation. He just didn't know what to do because he was so out of it. Suddenly it reached he was drowning in it. Then he said, okay,
until
quickly, let's fix it. Let's
yeah,
It was too late.
yeah.
You know,
It's like your
let's say
ship
so
is drowning, and you're trying to take a bucket mug and like trying to bail yourself out.
correct. And that's happening in lots of societies across the globe. And you see it
Yeah,
in manifestation in form of different ways. Gone are the days when, it used to be just peaceful all the time. We're reaching
yeah,
a point where it's just not peaceful all the time anymore. There's people are really edgy, people are really nerved and unnerved, and it's not going to change unless we as a society decide to say, okay, let's take a breath, let's be a little reasonable about this. Like how we have blankets, society blankets for the poor, meaning if you're
yeah,
below a poverty line, we society comes to help
you
you
need
out.
a net.
Same way
Yeah,
there
you
has to
need a
be a
social
cap
net.
on wealth. After
Yeah,
you make so many million, you cannot make any more. It
yeah.
just doesn't make sense. What's
Or
the
there's
point
an
having
option. You don't have to tax it. You can spend it how you will, but you're enforced to spend it at least to societal good in
correct?
certain ways.
Yeah, 80% of a project has to be spent on revitalizing society, and it has to be a
Exactly.
non-profit, meaning
Yeah,
it should not be for profit. Whatever you decide, you build a school, it should be not for profit. You build a
yeah.
college, you should ensure that it's not for profit. Tatas are a great example of this. The
Oh yeah,
reason why
they're a
Tatas
brilliant
are so
example.
loved and they're so appreciated in India is they made a lot of money, but they take an equal chunk of that money, knowing that for their own self-preservation in India, they're as foreigners, they're Parsis here. They
Yeah,
made sure they will be loved by Indians. Indians love them for the simple reason they take care. If a Tata spends 1 rupee on himself, he spends 10 rupee on everybody else.
definitely.
And if he feels like I need to have 100 million for myself, he'll make sure he gives the 500 billion to everybody else. So that way, no one will ever come back to him and say, dude, you have so much money because
Yeah,
he's giving so much of it away.
yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, you flip on it, you see Ambani. Why do
Oh,
people have this like, Ambani? Why? Because not only is he hoarding his wealth, he's showing it off. It's like he decides to gift some buddy friend of his who's a manager who's been with him for a long time. Here, take 100 crore apartment free. And he does some shady things in his Reliance retail, pushing
yeah,
investors out. People feel like, hey, really, man? Do you really need to do that? But anyway, that being said, the essence of the article is that, you
yeah.
know, the troubles that you see in society are not going away anytime fast. Just like how in climate change, just because you turn off the emission right now, the the
You're not
effects
going to
of
stop the
whatever
problem.
damage we have done is not going to
Yeah.
disappear. Same way, the
Yes.
damage of free cash is not going to disappear. And we as a society need to look long and hard to find solutions to this.
Yeah.
Anyway, anything else you'd like to add, Shasha?
That's about it.
Okay. So thank you again for joining us today on Beerich. I hope you found this article informative and entertaining, as always. If you do like our channel, do subscribe to it and turn on the bell notification icon so you'll be notified every time we come up with a new video. Thank you again for joining us on Be Rich.
I am in Tokyo on work on the 5th of August 2023. I have a lot of following in Japan, Tokyo. Those who want to meet me in Tokyo on 5th August, kindly drop me an email on the address given below or contact us on WhatsApp there. My team would get in touch with you and facilitate the meeting. Once again, I thank you for your support for Be Rich. It's a great privilege and honor that so many of you in thousands have subscribed to my channel and have supported me. I have written 2 books in English, The Alchemy of Money and Ordinary Stocks, Extraordinary Profits. These books are published by us and are ready. If you want to procure a copy, send us a message to the WhatsApp number given below and my team would respond to you. If you want an Amazon Kindle copy, you can click the link below. Finally, those who wish to consult with me can send a mail to berichenglish@gmail.com. Once again, I thank you for your support. If you like this video, press the subscribe button of my channel, hit the like button and turn on the bell notification.